So yeah, so this is, oop. We're going to open the committee meeting for the Charter School Board Committee. And we're going to go over the staff memo. Yeah, I think she's trying to turn. Is that better? Yay.
I think it's better.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds better.
Okay.
So anyway, thank you for being here. Happy summer.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we're here to hear the annual performance framework and report for the charter schools, and that's Emerson, Portland Arthur Academy, Le Monde, Portland Village School, Kairos.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Not POIC?
That's an alternate school.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, well,
And I don't know if we need to do introductions. Could we quickly do introductions, starting with Kara?
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Michelle DePass, board member.
Julia Brim-Edwards, board and committee member.
Patty Sullivan, board committee member.
Eddie Wong, board member.
thank you. Karina Wolf, Senior Director of Schools for Multiple Pathways to Graduation.
Sunita Sandoz, the Director of Charter Schools for PPS, and I recognize some of you because I was the lead administrator at the Emerson School, one of our PPS charter schools, for 8 years prior to taking on this role. And this is I just completed my first year in this role at PPS.
Excellent. And were you one of the people that they were like, there were some administrative changes?
That is
report.
some of the administrative changes that are mentioned in the memo and in the slides, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, board members, for having us. We are fulfilling our statutory obligation as a district to report out on each charter school annually. And so what we are going to do today is share about a little bit about charter schools and Portland Public Schools, our mission and our role as an authorizer. We'll give an overview of each of the charter schools, share some of the charter school demographics, answer questions, and have time for public comment. And there are more materials that were in your packet that are the performance frameworks on each of the 5 charter schools that PPS authorizes. And Sunita Sandoz and myself will go back and forth in the presentation.
Excellent, thank you.
Sunita, do you want to take this one?
Sure. Would you like me to just read through it? Or?
Sure.
Okay. The charter schools mission, the mission of the PPS Charter Schools Office is to support and monitor a high-performing and innovative PPS charter school portfolio, to promote equity and learning for all students, to advocate and act as a liaison for the district in its role as a charter school authorizer with PPS charter schools, and then also to educate the charter schools, parents, stakeholders, community partners, and the district about Oregon charter school statutes and best practices.
So the role of the authorizer is to review and approve make either an approval or denial on the annual applications for the establishment of new PPS charter schools, to conduct ongoing oversight and annual evaluation, to determine whether charter schools meet expected outcomes, to recommend charter renewal, to implement interventions for underperforming schools. We serve as the fiscal pass-through agent for all of the state school funding. We create conditions that improve student outcomes while protecting school statutory autonomy. Maintain a respectful and mutually beneficial relationship with each of the schools, their school leaders, and boards of directors. We provide resources, professional development, and cost-neutral assistance. And we providing access and information systems and data, and we serve as a conduit between the district and schools through communication, advocacy, and partnership. And lastly, we serve in the role of developing knowledge of schools through frequent informal visits throughout the year.
The Charter Schools Office located within multiple pathways to graduation, provides support to, I should say, the approximately, it's just under 1,800 PPS students attending 5 PPS-sponsored and 2 state-sponsored charter schools. So we're just under 1,300 for the 5 PPS-sponsored and approximately 475 at the 2 state-sponsored charter schools that are within the PPS boundaries. Compliance with ORS 338, Oregon Public Charter School Statutes. Oversight and support includes a weekly charter directors meeting, and then subsequent meetings beyond that. Completion of initial application review, contract renewals, and annual reporting. Support and accountability of annual fiscal, operational, and academic reports. That looks like the frameworks that were sent to you all in the materials. And school site visits. We do those on a monthly basis, and then there's a formal site visit at the end of each school year with each of the schools.
As Director DePass mentioned, so we have, there are K-5s, are the Emerson School, Kairos PDX Learning Academy, and Portland Arthur Academy. We have 2 K-8 schools, which are Le Monde French Immersion and Portland Village School. And then the 2 state-sponsored charter schools are also both K-8s, and that is the Ivy School and the Cottonwood School for civics and science.
This is just a general charter school overview that our office put together to give you all a sense of where we are right now in this moment in time. Because there's no formal board committee work, I just wanted to let you all know when everybody, when the schools all started and where they are in the process of looking toward a renewal. The next renewal for a PPS charter school will be in 2029, and that will be the Emerson School. And that is because all of the schools in this past, most recent renewal period received 10-year charter renewals. So again, 2029 will be the next one. That's not to say that we're not looking at the schools on an annual basis, and those frameworks of taking a look, the deep dive into the academic and financial and organizational health of each of the schools happens on an annual basis. But the renewal with the district for a charter, the next one will happen in 2029 for the Emerson School. And this is just current enrollment. And we've got some interesting facility updates that I just wanted to make sure everybody knows. That's been, I think, a hot topic in the charter world and with the PPS board for years now, since charters need to find their own facility and pay for their own facility. We have a couple of schools that have moved into new facilities and then stable leases for all of our other charter schools. So it's feeling like a moment in time where there is stability in terms of facilities for charter schools, and that feels good.
Okay, so just a little bit about each of the schools. So the Emerson School is K-5, as we said, and its focus is project-based learning. So the enrollment at Emerson School is 130. They are one of the schools that Sunita was just referencing. They moved to a new downtown Portland location, not far off of NATO Parkway, that was successfully renovated January of 2024, and they have a 15-year lease with a 5-year lease option. So this is their first school year in that building, which is very exciting. In 2023-24 OSAS scores, which are the last scores, of course, that we have, it shows that 62% of Emerson students meet or exceed in ELA, which exceeds district ELA scores by 5% for students in grades 3-5. 56% of Emerson students meet or exceed in math, which exceeds district scores by 3% for students in grades 3 through 5. Additional assessments, as charter schools, they have some autonomy in the assessments that they use. So at Emerson School, they're using, the assessments include guiding reading, running records, Lucy Calkins in writing, Bridges math, end of unit assessments, and project rubrics. Okay,
Kairos PDX, their focus is eliminating racial opportunity and achievement gaps. Their enrollment is currently at the end of the school year at 205. They have a new school leader in the principal role. Timothy Rogers started in this past December of 2024. And we have put a note in there that there have been, over the last 2 years, there's been transition in their administration, and we've seen some turnover there. 2023-24 OSAS data shows that while Kairos underperforms the district in ELA, and I put in the percentages just so you have a frame of reference, 35.4% meet or exceed, math 23.2% meet or exceed. You'll notice in the performance framework, if you take a look at that we also take into consideration sort of apples to apples, and look at the fact that Kairos students, the majority of whom are from historically underserved races, align with district scores, and that Black students at Kairos outperform the district in ELA by 3%, which is 20% at Kairos meeting or exceeding, and Black students align with the district in math in grades 3 through 5, 12% meet or exceed. This year, Kairos qualified for Title I intervention, and some additional assessment material. They do use MAP, Fontes and Pinnell, and they are the one charter school that is located in a Portland Public Schools building that they lease, the old Humboldt Elementary School.
May I interrupt and ask, when I read this, the OSAS data shows that students at Kairos are underperforming by quite a bit. And is there no requirement, even though we're comparing apples to apples, it's still like very disturbing, like it's okay because that's how all the Black kids are doing. But in a charter school that has, I think smaller class sizes, is there any reason why we wouldn't have an expectation that we want more rigorous, we want to have a higher expectation?
Absolutely. Yes. And
Like,
I can say yes. And you can also speak to this.
I know you probably agree with that, but I was like, that just seems really like,
So one of the things that I'll just say with Kairos, and they would say, I believe they would also say if they were here, but one of the things that we observe and will say, that I will observe and say, is that in the last 2 to 3 years, not unlike some schools post-COVID, but they have had multiple turnovers in leadership. And we put a note with intention around Principal Rogers. So Principal Rogers was also, when SEI had their middle school, Principal Rogers worked with Principal Linda Harris. And Principal Rogers at SEI at that point in time became a model school. And the district year over year as a model school, and we feel very positive, as does Kairos leadership and board, of course, who hired him, in Principal Rogers, and as a new school leader who came in mid-year. So I think the last couple years they've had a principal change in the middle of the year, which I think is hard on any school. And so, yes, and I think we are very hopeful and excited with stability for Kairos in the future.
The other thing I wanted to add is when Karina and I went and did the annual year-end site visit, obviously these types of questions were on our brain, and meeting with the administration and learning about their 3-year strategic plan, their internal plan to impact not just these scores, but impact enrollment and their internal assessment data, et cetera, I feel like some of those questions were addressed in terms of this strategic plan that they have put in place, and that felt like a good conversation about acknowledging where they are in time and also setting sights on the future.
With some very specific instructional coaching and professional learning communities. So some of the structures that they have in place, not unlike some of the other schools, but some of the structures that they shared and showed us and that they have in place are very, are very reassuring.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
How are they, I mean, I know we're trying to do the same in all of our schools.
Yep.
So how are they different than what our, not charter schools are trying to do?
So Sunita could say much more, but I'll just say a couple things. One of the things about charter schools is by statute, they have autonomy over their curriculum. And so that's one way that they are different and how they organize themselves as a school. There's more autonomy because each charter school has its own board of directors. Each charter school hires all their own staff, with the exception of special education staff that are Portland Public Schools staff that go to all of our contracted schools as well as our in-district schools. So I would say curriculum and how they organize themselves are two things that stick out, and I don't know what you would.
Well, I'm just thinking about being in the school and visiting the school and seeing a racially affirming and culturally affirming school in action. They have a program built in that at each, this just, I mean, I'm just kind of, it makes me feel good
what
to
you're
talk
gonna say.
about, but where every classroom is aligned with an HBCU, and they create an identity for the children within that classroom community based on the HBCU, and they have just a really rich, culturally affirming I won't say curriculum, but program, I guess. That looks different
Culture,
and feels different
environment,
when
like,
you're
yeah.
in the school for Black children and children of color. And what we see and what I can say anecdotally is it makes a big difference. Of course, we want to see data follow that, and we'll watch this, the strategic plan. We'll watch leadership as hopefully we've got a solid leader that will stay at the school for a number of years that we can follow. But when I visit and speak to families and children and staff members, it feels different I believe, for those students and families of color.
Do they also have smaller classes or limit size of classes?
I actually don't know if they cap their classroom size. They do have smaller classroom size, but I don't know if they've got a cap on their enrollment in each class.
Okay.
I have a quick, hopefully quick clarifying question. This doesn't just apply to Kairos. This is for all the charter schools listed here, because listing percentages of ELA school scores if they exceed or not meet it. It looks like some of them are, but not. I don't know. I'm not sure if all of them are, but are all of them controlled for demographics?
Controlled for demographics in terms of
Yes, save more.
Like for example, whether historically underserved, high income, low income parent,
Sure.
education status. Because one of the things I want to just make sure that we compare apples to apples, right?
Sure.
When we're looking at ELA scores, we already know that kids who enroll in charter schools, there's a higher percentage of them that have parents that are more involved than typical. Not always, but there's a self-selecting, issue there, right?
Yeah,
and
a condition.
Condition. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And so, a lot of times, not all, of course, there's many exceptions, but a lot of times in charter schools, you tend to have, like, for example, higher SES being represented and things like that. So I'm just curious, like, when we look at these scores, like 5%, like Emerson is exceeding district for 5%, but is that controlled for
You can
demographics?
look at
So
slide
I think
16, which
so I-
shows all the demographics.
Yeah, I seen that, but
schools, which
I was just gonna say that, so if we could just continue, there's a slide in just a few slides where we talk about the demographics against each school and then against the PPS district average. Would that answer your question?
no,
I
Because
think you're
I-
maybe referring to the lottery process.
no. So
No. Okay.
okay, yes, I know about the chart on 16, and it has some, like, for example, direct certification, historically underserved, right? but doesn't necessarily control for like SCS level, like parent educational level. I know this is probably not data that we have, but I just want to throw that out there. Are we comparing apples to apples? And one of those things is actually looking at, parent income, parent SES in terms of, what percentage of the school falls in what category. So it has some of them, but not all of them. And that's, I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Yep, we don't have that information for any of our schools, like how much parents make or what education level. I mean, that's not standard reporting data.
Correct.
Exactly. And I want to
That is
highlight
But I
that
think it's,
that
yes, I think
lack
it's
of data
important. It's interesting. It's kind of like banks don't report the race of mortgages that they hand out, and that's a problem.
So I would just say that 2 of the 5 in district authorized charter schools are title schools. So Portland Arthur Academy and Kairos are both qualified for title. So we can share, that is some information, but Director Brim Edwards is correct. We don't collect parent income data it's limited across the board.
Yes, and that's what I thought, and I just bring that question up to highlight that we don't have this data. And so when we look at, for example, like ELA data is 3% higher than, we don't know if their education level of their parents on average are 3% higher than the district average. And the reason I point that out is to highlight that it's not apples to apples, because we have charter schools that are self-selected population. That may or may not be a bad thing. It's not a judgment on that, but I just want to make sure that when we compare our data, that we're clear that it is not perfect data. And I just want to highlight that. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that, we don't know what the mean is because the mean varies by building.
Yes.
And we couldn't even get that through census data because of the dispersal of people like driving. So I don't know. I'm a researcher. I like to look at data. Apples to apples is ideal. But I hear what you're saying is that we're comparing schools to the overall outcomes in the district,
Sure.
not to itself, right? Thank you for letting us interrupt.
No, absolutely.
Because I had that question too.
Did
Can you
you?
isolate the reasons for the success of some of the schools where they're outperforming? That's question number 1 that I had. Could wait for later.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'm like, what can we learn from
And
Le Monde, L'École Française? What are they doing right? And is the outperformance due to the socioeconomic status, or is it due to having 2 languages?
Sure.
Yeah, great question. So if it's okay, we'll just finish the last few slides, and then I
Sure.
love the questions. So speaking of, Le Monde French Immersion is next. It's a K-8 French Immersion. It's an IB school, world school, and it's an IB in the primary years program. Its enrollment has 376 students currently, and the 23-24 OSAS data shows Le Monde students in grades 3-5 outperforming the district by 22%, 79% of their students meet or exceed an ELA, and outperform the district by 22%, 75% of their students meet or exceed in math. In grades 6-8, Le Monde students outperform the district 34%, with 89% of their students meeting or exceeding an ELA, and outperform the district by 31%, with 75% of students meeting or exceeding in math. Also of note, 100% of their graduates, their 8th grade graduates, meet high school language credit requirements prior to starting 9th grade. The additional assessments used include MAP, DIBELS, and ADAPL, and they are located in Inner Southeast.
Okay, Portland Arthur Academy, K-5, direct instruction is their program. Their enrollment's at 162. State assessment data shows 70% of Portland Arthur Academy students meet or exceed an ELA, exceeds the district by 13% for students in grades 3 through 5. 50% of PAA students meet or exceed in math, which trails the district by 3% for students in grades 3 through 5. Math is a target area of improvement for PAA in 25-26. Of note, over 20% of PA students are English language learners, and their data shows that their English language learners exceeded district English language learners by 42.9% in ELA and by 16.8% in math in grades 3 through 5. This year, PAA qualified for Title I Targeted Intervention Program. There are additional assessments, Easy CBM, Mastery Learning, DI, Direct Instruction Program assessments. Their assessment is incredibly regular and constant, and they are located in Southeast Portland. They are, just of note, they are a consortium of Arthur Academies. They are one of 5 in the sort of metro area of Oregon. Yeah.
And then the last PPS-sponsored school is Portland Village School. Portland Village School is a K-8 Waldorf-inspired standards-based education school. They have an enrollment of 421 students. They are the other school that purchased a new facility this last year on the South Waterfront with the assistance of the Oregon Facilities Authority. They received occupancy and opened their new school last September of 2024. The 23-24 state assessment data release shows progress towards improvement. The school shows a 7% increase in ELA scores from 49 to 56% of students meeting or exceeding, and a 5% increase in math scores from 42 to 47 over their 22-23 assessment data. Additional assessments that Portland Village uses includes Easy CBM, Bridges Math, and end of unit mid-school math assessments. So they are one of the charter schools that is using some of our district, they're choosing to use the district adopted curriculum in part, and are seeing positive results with it.
This is just a note about our state-sponsored charter schools. We've mentioned there are 2 within PPS boundaries. In Portland, the district does provide special education services and pass-through of state funds, state school fund and SIA dollars, while ODE provides oversight for these schools. General education students are not included in PPS Synergy, so they're not counted in PPS numbers. Special education students are included in PPS special education numbers.
Exactly what that means, that, go back. Can you go back to that slide? Okay,
Sure. I mean, I think this is just, this slide highlights sort of where our PPS charter school office interfaces with these schools in terms of passing through dollars, and that special education services are provided by PPS, at these schools. But there's not an oversight, which is why you won't see a framework. I'm not doing site visits to those 2 schools. We do invite those schools to our weekly charter directors meetings, and they do attend because we're all speaking the same language and in the same, yeah, and it really is a community of practice. And that I've really appreciated that as well, because each year there seems to be a little bit more and a little bit more that is asked of the district in regard to working with these 2 schools.
By ODE.
By ODE. Karina was mentioning earlier that there are, at this point in time in Oregon, there are 4 state-sponsored charter schools, and 2 of them are in Portland. And we have an office and some infrastructure, and also just the way grant reporting is evolving, we seem to have more and more overlap with these schools in terms of their reporting being embedded in district reporting when it comes to SIA and the integrated programs grants.
So,
Special ed,
Special ed and
100%.
fiscal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Special ed and fiscal. Yeah.
how does that
Pass through.
impact our costs? Because I know it's state sponsored, but I also know that the state also caps special ed funding at $11 11%, right? And so having a state-sponsored school and yet PPS is on the hook for, which is fine, not a judgment, on the hook for servicing special ed services. How does that affect in terms of like cost?
Well, I think that's a great point. The special education, I mean, all students, when they are in our district at charter schools, they are PPS students. And so, as far as special, even with our state-sponsored schools, that is true as far as special education goes. So that is when you're asking, when we have, information about the entirety of the number of special education students and the entirety of funding, that is including our charter schools and all of the places, all of the buildings and all of the schools they provide services to. So that includes our charter schools.
Great, thank you. Because I know that PPS is reporting at something like 17%, and this includes it includes these schools as well, the state-sponsored schools
Yes.
as well. All right, thank you.
And then just a little bit about those. So Cottonwood has an enrollment of about approximately 200, and the Ivy School has an enrollment of approximately 275. And this was what I was getting to, which I think we were referencing earlier, which is just looking at the number of, with regard to income, the closest that we have around that, as has been mentioned, is our direct certification numbers, and our information around title, which Portland Arthur Academy and Kairos have qualified for title. So this is just a reference point for everyone. And that's really what we had, and then we would love to answer any questions if there are any.
Do we have any questions?
I can't remember the name of the school where they had a lot of English learners, but they were scoring higher than most other English learner schools.
Arthur Academy.
The Arthur Academy?
Yeah. Are they looking at what's happening there? I noticed it was direct instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Are they learning from that what we might apply
So I
to
think-
ours?
So I think Director DePass and yourself are bringing up very good points, which is outlined in the statute. It talks about charter schools being hubs of innovation, and part of the responsibility of the sponsoring districts or of the community, both on the district sponsored side and on the charter school side, is how are we sharing learnings? And I think that's an area of ongoing growth for us. So in years past, we've had schools that have, like Opal School or other schools that have put on conferences to talk about their model, where we had, as an example, we would say, Portland Public Schools teachers, would you like to attend this training or this training locally? Kairos has done that in years past, where they have had series of trainings where they have opened it to Portland Public Schools teachers. But I don't know, honestly, about Arthur with PPS in recent years.
There has not been, but I think we're all looking at that data. It's pretty significant. It's an area of pride for the school. They do, and I've asked anecdotally questions when I'm visiting, and I've seen in action their small group instruction. Direct instruction is really prescribed. It's highly structured. It demands sort of immediate feedback. It's teacher driven, demands feedback from a student. Certain learners learn really well in that environment. It wouldn't be ideal for every learner. And I think families, the school has worked hard to, I think each charter school has been working hard, I would say, in the last decade and 5 years, since the pandemic, to really tasked at looking at demographics and saying, how can we impact our demographics? How can we change not only the narrative around charter schools, but also the who's attracted to these schools, who's coming to these schools, who can access these schools. And they've done an incredible job of really leaning into their community where their building is, and have grown their population of students from underserved communities. And they are having that success. They're proud of it. We're looking at it. But there's there's opportunity for these schools to be seen as lab schools, and like, what are they doing, and how do we learn more from that?
That was
about
quite a
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they traditionally, when we gave them the charter, it was somewhat controversial because direct instruction had sort of a bad
Yes.
reputation. It was kind of drill and kill, is what they called it.
Yeah.
I think we gave them the charter in 2003 or 4. But they're located in Ascension Church on 76th and Yamhill, which has a traditional parish, but they also have a very active, lots of Spanish masses and everything else. So it's a very community-centered facility. And I mean, they're probably one of all these. Emerson has been around a long time too, but I think Arthur Academy is the second longest.
Yeah.
They have a very much of a niche, but it was controversial and at the time, districts could not refuse to give a charter. So if they had a charter application that was met the most basic, you had to give it. So PPS gave a lot of charters in those years. But it turned out it was a pretty good bet and has filled a niche.
It has filled a niche. Yeah.
I love, I know I have a brother that could have really used that direct instruction that, this is what is expected. There's no creativity around it. I know that's worked for me too in some circumstances. And my kids went to Emerson, and that was, it just happened to work out for where I was working at the time. I could pick them up and walk them across Burnside, and it could be at my work for a little bit.
Yeah.
It was really nice. I don't really have any questions. I asked my main question is isolate, the reasons for the success at some of those schools. And also I'm always curious, you always hear, we'd like to get more diverse and we just can't. And transportation is an issue. So, especially for the schools where they're successful, I would love to see, more of our kids that are struggling be able to attend, because I think the diversity is really important too, economic and racial, gender. So
I do have a couple questions. This is not the question, but there have been national studies that do control, for example, parent income, parent education level, and performance at charter schools. But it's a national study, and overall, just in general, not very favorable for charter schools. It would be interesting to look at one specifically for PPS for Portland, because I know we're in a different scenario than most of the country. So it would be one thing I don't know if there is any avenue, or maybe it has already been done, but maybe even partnering with a university to look into, for example, researching data on when you actually do control for parent education, parent income level, and demographics, and how they compare to our kids that are going to comprehensive elementary and middle schools. I think that'd be very valuable, and I would push for some kind of look into that. My other two questions, I have two questions. One is, am I correct in understanding all our charter schools are a lottery, and it's purely lottery, right? There's no denying of applications and things like that going on, right?
Go ahead.
Enrollment is dictated by statute. There's lots of things, as Director Brim Edwards just said, that are outlined by statute around the authorization, the application process, the enrollment, and the lottery process.
So the lotteries are blind lotteries. I only say intended because there are a number of our schools that use a weighted lottery. Other than that, there's no controlling for, who's applying and who's,
Except for siblings and stuff, right?
except for siblings. You can apply to ODE for a waiver. The only schools I have seen apply for a waiver outside of a weighted lottery is Kairos, and they applied for a waiver this year to have children of staff members be able to attend the school. So other than that, you would have to apply for a waiver for any of those special circumstances. And like I said, Emerson and Portland Village School and Kairos have been using a weighted lottery to try and impact the demographics at the end of the day. Emerson and Portland Village School were using a triple weight for race and socioeconomic status.
Okay, it's
So-
helpful to hear.
Oh, go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
So Arthur Academy, it sounds like, does it take a higher percentage of
No,
English as second
I
language?
mean,
It doesn't.
That's
Okay.
I'm going to stand up my
'Cause you're
apologies
tired
for
of-
my legs.
So a number of years
Yeah.
ago, as a part of our racial equity work, one of the things we did was really look at the demographics of charter schools and think about as a community of practice with charter school directors and charter school boards, what are the opportunities to have charter schools look like this, more match the demographics of our district? And in a good world, actually serve more historically underserved students than our district. And so one of the things that all of the schools did was to get all their brochures translated and all their information translated into the 5 major languages, and to go out and do recruitment and share in a variety of cultural communities their information. And Arthur did that, I think, with great passion, and the others did as well. But Arthur is a success story in that way, where they were very thoughtful and deliberate around how they could reach communities of color and communities of multilingual language learners. And so that's where that has been really successful. But in part, it was our shared work with Portland Public Schools in getting materials translated and having and really partnering with them in our shared effort and intention.
So reaching out, but still having the straight lottery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I wanted to offer, a friend of mine just accepted the Dean of Education at Lewis and Clark position, and he'll be starting in August. And he kind of volunteered, I had lunch with him, he volunteered his graduate students, he doesn't know them yet, but he volunteered them if we needed them for any policy research or anything education related, so that he's looking for projects.
That's good to know. Thank you for sharing. I think that's what sets PPS apart from a lot of places, and it's great to know. My other last question is there any dropout and discipline data as well, like in terms of looking at kids that have dropped out, kicked out, suspended, discipline data, and the demographics of those students as well?
I don't have that. We don't have that prepared today,
You
but
don't
we
have
can
to
certainly get that and share that.
Sure.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a little bit of oversight on that as well.
Okay.
I had, I don't know if you're done.
No, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay. I was curious, we have in the past met regularly with the charter committee, and I think we took a hard look at the committees last year, and we're trying to not have a meeting for meeting's sake. So I was going to ask you, as the experts, what a regular cadence would look like that was fulfilling our, baseline obligation, and also allow us an opportunity to hear from, because your work is important. We don't want to just, put it off to the last meeting of the year. But is there
But we did.
is there a regularity that you would recommend in terms of how often we should do this, and where?
I would defer to Karina in regard to the sort of statutory requirement of annually presenting. And then working backward from there are moments in time that will also dictate what work is to be done from a charter committee. This particular school year, for example, there's an annual opportunity for people to apply, to become a PPS charter school. Letters of intent are due in May, and then an application would be due in July. We did get a letter of intent, and then they we were in communication and ready to have sort of a Q&A meeting with them, and they said, nope, we're actually not going to apply this year. So had they moved forward with the application process, that would then require work from a committee that would look different than when we don't have an application. And then the other moments that I can think of besides these renewals that will start up again in 2029 is if a school wants to change anything in their charter. For example, one school was kind of asking about the possibility of changing their enrollment cap so that they could enroll more students. That would have to be the work with the committee as well. But in terms of a cadence, I defer to you.
And I would just say, just a note, is that the letter of intent is preferred, but not required, is my understanding. But the applications, there is a hard date for applications. So while it is unlikely, because we haven't heard of it yet, somebody could apply by the July date. But they ask for the courtesy of a letter in May if that's gonna happen. So I would say, I mean, at a minimum, right, is meeting the statutory, is being compliant with statute. And if not, maybe, more frequently than that, to hear from the schools or hear about practices. I know that in the past, when we have had a charter committee, it has been nice at board members' request to go see the schools or to hear more information. So I think it is nice to have some kind of cadence, and we would defer to you all.
I just wonder if we
we
would,
stand ready to support and to share information, and to take folks to schools as you would like.
we want to be supportive also. I guess I was thinking, I mean, if we met 3 times a year, it would be regular. If it wasn't needed, it could be, okay, everybody gets the night off, but it might be nice to schedule it, looking at Kara, ahead of time, so we have an opportunity and a placeholder for those conversations. It's just an idea.
So-
Looking at Eddie.
So one thing in the
Dr.
past, instead of just having a charter committee, there's been like a charter and alternative ed. So it gave a lot of schools that didn't ever get really any airtime or much consideration, an opportunity to engage with the board and central district staff and raise issues. And I know, like, when Director Green and then Director Constam, they did some, I think, really important work that helped provide more support for those schools, like changing the pass-through amounts. And you go way back, you had an Ed Options, which had basically kind of all the non-neighborhood school programs. So they were the ones that approved, say, like the language immersion programs,
Yeah.
Sunnyside Environmental,
So-
Creative Science School. So it was a place where you could get, that you didn't have to have at the board level be doing that work. I mean, but you could go in deep. And I will just say, when I was on the board, we had to take the charters away or deny two charters that had been operations. And it was really important that we'd had a committee and we had engagement, so it didn't just seem like the board was coming in randomly and making a decision, but that they had the courtesy and, like, they were like not on a corrective action plan, but they had been told, you're not financially going concern, or your outcomes are, not at all what we'd expect. And I forget what's it called when you
We had to do a close. We've had to do a couple closures,
like Victory and what was the other?
Leap and Trillium.
Oh, I was involved in all of those. So it's good because I think it respects the school community and people who have really, like, poured their hearts into building a school. And sometimes it just doesn't work out, and the board is ultimately the one that has to do it, and seems more respectful that and you've worked with them. So I would say, like, more often. One thing I wanted to comment about just the data, and something that this came up when we the last time Le Monde received, I don't know if it was a renewal or the first time around. But they clearly, their demographics, are very skewed, to have very few direct certification, fewer special ed, fewer students of color, the fewest historically underserved students. And we had discussions with them. I think that's when they started translating all their, but really, like, what are they doing to diversify their school, to be more representative of the PPS school community? And I know they're not up for renewal now, but I think it's worth asking what they're doing, so they don't just get asked in the year that they have a renewal, because it looks like the pattern hasn't significantly changed.
So thank you for that. Just to reiterate what Sunita said earlier, is that when we have Sunita we both go and see schools, Sunita more often than myself, all throughout the year, and then we have whole process of an annual review and site review, and we have various lists of questions all throughout it. And particularly, this is what's really nice about the weekly meetings, is this topic is an ongoing topic with all of our schools, and so that question is not it's a common question. You bring up a very relevant issue. And what I have heard most recently, and you can certainly add to it, and is from Shuka, their head of school, is some targeted outreach to pastors and specific churches. And she actually has done some connecting with Director Green around some opportunities. And then I think with some other specific community outreach to specific communities of color.
Absolutely, and leaning in on those weekly meetings, because you've hit on something that other schools have impacted the bottom line in terms of their demographics. And so Shuka, being a leader, saying, well, I'm trying this, this, and this. What are you all doing in this small community? Which is how she got the idea to look at churches and speak with pastors, and because is another school that has had success in that way. So I won't say, I will say it's not for a lack of trying. It is ongoing work. They recognize it. They are looking at it. And I think when you look at the demographics, if you look at 10 years ago and today for these schools, you will see a number of schools have shifted the demographics for all the reasons Karina mentioned, and Lamont's still struggling to do so.
They haven't really
that is
switched.
clear.
So you can say that a board member
Yeah.
inquired
Absolutely.
about their progress on that, because
Yeah.
we had a pretty lengthy discussion. They were looking at immigrants who came from French-speaking
Yep. Yes.
countries.
Yep.
Not France, but French-speaking countries. So I don't know if that
They
results
have
in
had
anything.
success in regard to their staffing, in terms of attracting and employing native French speakers from African countries and other countries outside of France, which I think is a move in the right direction, because we all know that visibility within the building is important as well. So, there are shifts that are happening there.
I'm realizing I'm going to have to keep your number for a few more years.
Yeah.
And because of your institutional knowledge, you've got so much history, and I just can, in this moment, just want to appreciate you for what you're bringing. Just the history of knowing which schools have done a better job than others. So thank you.
You're
I
going to
had-
carry on that legacy.
I have a question about how many high schools have French programs that the Lamont people go to?
That's a great question. I let you speak to that.
Okay, so McDaniel, Lincoln. I feel like Cleveland, but I should.
Sure.
I know McDaniel and Lincoln for sure, and I know that there's multiple, that there's more than two. I can happily get back. I apologize. I
I'm
am not.
just curious
It's
if
in the back of my head, and I'm not pulling it forward right now. But I can
That-
get
that
back
might
to you
be
about that.
some reason
There are
they
multiple
don't have
high schools that have French.
Yeah.
I hosted a French exchange student from a small town in the south of France. He was like, no one speaks French, like around the world. He was studying Chinese. He just said nobody speaks French.
And I will just say to Director Brim Edwards, so the Ed Options is changed its name to Multiple Pathways to Graduation. So when that was the change years ago, after I came to the district. So that's kind of the department. So there was a lot of, that's where I think it was the charter schools and alternative programs. It was meant to be broader than Multiple Pathways to Graduation, but a lot of it was about the MPG schools.
I mean,
or
it really gave the
programs.
board a lot of visibility to, what it was, virtual scholars. I mean, the whole range of programming weren't traditional neighborhood schools, which tends to be the central focus.
Reconnection Center services. Yep.
Well, thank you very much. I know it's probably been a really long day. We appreciate your, this was a great presentation and learning opportunity. And I appreciate your input to how much we should meet going forward.
And again, we
Looking at
defer to
Director
you all.
Wong, we're trying to, right size it in terms of, the time commitment for board members and also thinking
Absolutely.
about staff too, like we sit out here and look in the audience and people are just, 10 o'clock at night not wanting to be here. And so we're trying to, right size the number of meetings and the types so we can just be as effective as possible.
Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
I think we're done.
Thanks.
Thank you, Director Brim Edwards.
I
being at your
know.
last board.